My beloved child, someone you love recently placed a quiet test before you, and you walked through it without ever realizing your heart was being watched. It was not a cruel trap. It was not designed to embarrass you or make you fail. It began with one question they had been too afraid to ask directly: can I trust this person with the most vulnerable parts of me? What happened next did more than answer that question. It caused them to sit alone in the dim light of evening, holding back tears as they realized they may have misunderstood you for far longer than they wanted to admit. They had been carrying uncertainty beneath their calm expression. You may have noticed a slight distance in their words, a hesitation where warmth once flowed easily, or moments when they seemed to study your reactions more closely than usual. You wondered whether their feelings were fading. You may even have blamed yourself, replaying conversations and searching for the instant when everything changed. But their silence was not emptiness. Their silence was observation. They were trying to separate what they feared from what was true, and they chose a secret way to find out. The idea came to them during a conversation with someone they trusted. They were sitting across from this person at a small table, while rain tapped softly against a nearby window. The room smelled faintly of coffee and wet pavement. Your soulmate had been speaking about you carefully, protecting your name even while admitting their confusion. Then the person across from them asked, have they ever actually given you a reason not to trust them, or are you expecting them to repeat what someone else did to you? That question followed them home. It stayed in their mind while they removed their coat, turned off the lights, and stood beside the window watching headlights pass below. They knew you were not responsible for the wounds another person had left behind. Still, trust had become difficult for them. In the past, someone had looked directly into their eyes, promised honesty, and then hidden the truth until it caused damage that could not be easily repaired. Since then, your soulmate had learned to listen for what people avoided saying. They noticed changed stories, uncertain pauses, and smiles that arrived too late. But with you, they could not find anything clear. That should have brought them peace. Instead, it frightened them even more. Because the deeper their feelings became, the more they feared discovering that the connection was too beautiful to be real. They began wondering whether you were simply better at hiding things than those who had hurt them before. That thought made them ashamed, yet it would not leave. So they made a decision they would later regret. They created a situation in which telling the truth might cost you something, while a small lie could make everything easier. It started with a detail from an ordinary conversation. Days earlier, they had mentioned something personal, a private concern involving their future, their family, or a decision they were not ready to share with others. Their voice had lowered when they told you. Their eyes had searched yours for reassurance. They asked you not to repeat it, and you gave your word without making a dramatic promise. You simply said, "You trusted me with it. It stays with me." At the time, they nodded. But later, they wondered whether your promise would remain firm when keeping it became inconvenient. So they allowed someone else to approach you. The person did not come with accusations. They appeared casual, almost friendly, as though the conversation had developed naturally. They hinted that they already knew part of what your soulmate had shared. They mentioned just enough detail to make you believe the secret was no longer truly secret. Then they waited for you to complete the story. You could have done it easily. You could have filled the silence with information and later defended yourself by saying, "I thought they already knew." You could have revealed one small piece, believing it would not matter. You might even have gained approval or avoided an awkward moment by pretending you were included in everything. But you did not. You changed the direction of the conversation. You said something simple, perhaps without knowing how much weight your words carried, "That is not my story to tell." You should ask them. The person pressed again. They smiled and said, "Come on, I already know most of it." Still, you remained steady. You did not become defensive. You did not make yourself look important by showing how much your soulmate had confided in you. You protected what had been placed in your hands, even though the person standing before you made it seem harmless to let it go. What you did not know was that your soulmate would hear every detail of that conversation. When the message reached them, they read it twice. The first time, they looked for the hidden flaw. They expected to find that you had revealed something small. The second time, they read more slowly. Their breathing changed when they reached the words you had spoken, "That is not my story to tell." For several seconds, they did not move. The room around them became strangely quiet. A clock ticked somewhere nearby. Their phone remained in their hand, its pale light shining across their face. They had expected confirmation of their fear. Instead, they found evidence of your character, and it forced them to confront something uncomfortable. You had been loyal while they had been suspicious. Yet this was only the first part of the test. Your soulmate had also been wondering whether you would tell the truth when honesty made you look less impressive. They remembered a conversation in which you had spoken about a goal, an opportunity, or something you hoped would happen soon. They knew you wanted their respect. They knew you wanted them to see you as capable and dependable. So they quietly introduced a second situation, one that offered you the chance to exaggerate. A question reached you through an unexpected person. They asked whether you had already achieved something that was still in progress. The wording made it easy to say yes. Nobody would have been able to prove otherwise in that moment. A polished answer might have made you look successful. It could have protected your pride and earned admiration. But again, you chose the uncomfortable truth. You admitted that you were still working toward it. You did not decorate the answer. You did not pretend to be farther ahead than you were. You said, "I am not there yet, but I am doing everything I can to get there." When your soulmate heard those words, something inside them shifted. They had spent years around people who treated vulnerability like weakness. People who changed details to preserve their image. People who wanted to appear flawless, even if it required dishonesty. Yet you had allowed yourself to be seen unfinished. You had chosen truth over applause. That touched them more deeply than success would have. But it also created a painful question they could not escape. If you had been honest when no reward was guaranteed, why had they felt the need to test you at all? That night, they returned to the first memory of meeting you. They remembered something they had nearly forgotten: the way you listened when they spoke, not waiting for your turn, but actually listening. They remembered how you had once corrected a misunderstanding even though remaining silent would have benefited you. They remembered a moment when you apologized without blaming anyone else. At the time, these details had seemed small. Now they appeared like scattered pieces of a truth they had refused to see. You had been showing them who you were from the beginning. Their fear had simply been louder than the evidence. As that realization settled over them, the energy changed. Relief entered first, warm and unexpected. Then came tenderness. They pictured your face and imagined how you would feel if you discovered that they had doubted you. Finally, guilt arrived, the kind that does not shout, but sits heavily in the chest and makes a person question their own choices. They whispered into the quiet room, "What have I done?" They were not only ashamed because they had tested you. They were afraid that their test had revealed something about themselves. It showed how much their past still controlled their present. It showed that even while asking you to be open, they had been hiding their own fears. And it showed that they wanted certainty from you while offering you suspicion in return. For a moment, they considered saying nothing. They thought about keeping the test hidden forever. You had passed. No damage seemed visible. Why disturb the peace by admitting what they had done? But then they imagined building a future with you while carrying this secret. They understood that silence would turn the test into the very thing they feared most, dishonesty. That realization changed the situation completely. Now the question was no longer whether you could be trusted. The question was whether they had the courage to become trustworthy too. The following morning, they began writing a message to you. Their fingers hovered over the screen. They typed, deleted, and started again. "I need to tell you something," sounded too alarming. "I did something stupid," felt too small. "Please don't be angry," made the confession about their comfort instead of your feelings. So they set the phone down. Hours passed. They carried the unsent message through the day, feeling its weight each time they looked at you or saw your name. They wanted to speak, but the closer they came to honesty, the more they feared losing what your honesty had proven was real. Then another unexpected detail reached them. The person who had approached you during the first test revealed something your soulmate had not planned. After refusing to share the secret, you had defended your soulmate when they were not there. The conversation had shifted, and someone had questioned your soulmate's choices. You could have remained neutral. You could have agreed to avoid tension. Instead, you said, "They have reasons you may not understand. I trust their heart." Those words broke through the last wall inside them. You had protected their private story. You had told the truth about your own unfinished journey. And when no one asked you to, you had defended their heart. They sat down abruptly, as though their legs could no longer hold the force of what they were feeling. Tears gathered before they could stop them. This was not the reaction they had expected from a secret test. They had believed they were investigating your character, but in the end, your choices had exposed the depth of their own feelings. They realized they were not merely curious about you. They were not simply attracted to you. They had begun imagining a life in which your honesty became the place where their heart could finally rest. But there was still one final truth they had not told anyone, not the friend who advised them, not the person who helped with the test, and certainly not you. The test had not begun only because they feared betrayal. It had begun because, just days earlier, they had received an opportunity that could change their entire future. It might require a move, a sacrifice, or a decision that would affect every part of their life. They had been given a limited amount of time to answer, and before choosing, they needed to know whether the connection between you was strong enough to carry something that serious. Your honesty gave them the answer. Yet instead of making the decision easier, it made the stakes far greater. Because now they knew that walking away from you would not mean leaving behind a passing connection. It would mean leaving behind the one person who had protected them when they were absent, honored them when secrecy was tested, and told the truth even when truth offered no advantage. That evening, they opened the unfinished message again. This time, they did not delete the words. They wrote, "I need to confess something. I tested your honesty, and what I discovered changed the decision I was about to make." Their thumb hovered over the send button. But before they could press it, another message appeared on their screen from the person connected to the opportunity that could take them away from you. It contained only one sentence. "We need your final answer tonight." Your soulmate looked from that message to the confession written for you. Tears blurred the screen as they realized they could no longer delay either choice. They would have to reveal the test, tell you what your honesty had awakened in them, and make a decision that might bring them closer to you or separate your paths before you ever learned how deeply you had touched their heart. And then, with trembling hands, they finally pressed send. My beloved child. The moment the message was sent, silence settled over everything. Your soulmate did not immediately feel relief. Instead, they felt exposed in a way they had never experienced before. Their heart raced as though every hidden fear they had carried for years had finally stepped into the light. There was no way to take the confession back now. No carefully chosen explanation could erase the fact that they had secretly tested your honesty. All they could do was wait and hope that the truth, even though it arrived late, would still be received with grace. For a long while, there was no reply. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. They replayed every memory of the two of you together. They remembered the laughter that had come so naturally. They remembered the quiet conversations that lasted longer than either of you expected. They remembered every moment when your kindness had appeared so effortless that they had almost overlooked how rare it truly was. Then they realized something profound. The greatest lesson had never been about whether you were honest. It was about whether they were willing to become honest themselves. Until that moment, they had asked love to prove itself before they allowed themselves to trust. Now they understood that real love does not begin with certainty. It begins with the courage to remove every disguise and stand before another person exactly as you are, flawed, healing, hopeful, and sincere. Finally, your reply appeared. It was shorter than they expected. There were no angry accusations. There were no dramatic speeches. Instead, your words carried a calm strength that immediately reached their heart. I wish you had trusted me enough not to test me. But I'm grateful you chose to tell me the truth instead of hiding it forever. They read those words again and again. Not because they were simple, but because they contained something they had searched for without realizing it. Mercy. You did not pretend the test had been harmless. You acknowledged the hurt it caused. Yet you also recognized the courage it took for someone to admit they were wrong without being forced to do so. That single response became the turning point neither of you expected. The walls your soulmate had spent years building began to fall, not all at once, but one honest conversation at a time. Over the following days, the two of you spoke more openly than ever before. They shared stories they had hidden from nearly everyone, the disappointments that made them cautious, the promises that had once been broken, and the quiet fear that every beautiful relationship eventually disappears. For the first time, they stopped speaking as someone trying to protect themselves. They spoke as someone finally learning how to trust. You listened without interrupting. Not because you had all the answers, but because sometimes the greatest gift one heart can give another is the feeling of being completely heard. As those conversations continued, something unexpected happened. The opportunity that had once seemed impossible to ignore slowly lost its power. Your soulmate looked again at the decision that had demanded an answer. It offered success. It promised recognition. It opened exciting possibilities. But it also required walking away from the connection that had become more precious than they had ever imagined. For days they wrestled with the choice. One path looked impressive to the world. The other felt peaceful deep within their soul. Then one quiet morning, just before sunrise, they stepped outside. The air was cool. The first light painted the horizon with gentle shades of gold and soft blue. Birdsong slowly filled the silence. Standing there, they realized they were no longer asking, which future looks bigger? Instead, they found themselves asking, which future feels more true? The answer surprised even them. For years they had chased certainty through achievements. Now they wanted something different. They wanted a life where honesty was never something to test. They wanted conversations where vulnerability was welcomed instead of feared. They wanted laughter that required no pretending. Most of all, they wanted to build something lasting with the person who had unknowingly shown them what genuine integrity looked like. That very day, they made their decision. They thanked the people who had offered the opportunity with sincere gratitude. Then they chose the path that allowed them to remain faithful to what had awakened inside their heart. It was not an easy decision. Every meaningful choice asks us to release one future in order to embrace another. But they walked away without regret. Because they finally understood that a peaceful heart is worth more than an impressive destination. Later, when they met you again, there was something noticeably different in their eyes. The uncertainty was gone. Not because every question had been answered, but because trust had replaced suspicion. As the two of you walked together, they quietly smiled and admitted something they had never confessed before. When I tested your honesty, I thought I was discovering who you were. They paused before continuing. But all I really discovered was the kind of person I wanted to become. Those words lingered between you like a gentle breeze. Neither of you rushed to fill the silence. Some moments become sacred precisely because they are allowed to breathe. In time, both of you came to understand that the test itself was never the foundation of your story. It became only a chapter. The real foundation was built afterward through confession, forgiveness, patient conversations, and the daily decision to choose truth even when it felt uncomfortable. That is how lasting relationships are formed. Not because two people never make mistakes, but because they refuse to let fear speak louder than honesty. As seasons changed, the memory of that hidden test slowly transformed. What had once been a source of regret became a reminder. Whenever either of you felt tempted to assume the worst, you remembered what suspicion had almost stolen. Whenever difficult conversations appeared, you chose openness before silence. Whenever fear whispered that trust was dangerous, you remembered that genuine love grows strongest where truth is welcomed with compassion. The greatest discovery was never that your soulmate found an honest person. The greatest discovery was that honesty has the quiet power to heal two hearts at the same time. One by remaining faithful to truth. The other by finding the courage to believe in it again. If this story has reached your heart today, let it remind you that trust cannot be forced, borrowed, or rushed. It is built through countless ordinary moments when people choose integrity over convenience, truth over appearances, and compassion over fear. Those small choices often become the strongest bridges between two souls. May your heart always have the wisdom to recognize honesty when it appears, the humility to admit mistakes when they are made, and the courage to forgive when forgiveness opens the door to healing. May your relationships be filled with conversations that bring peace, trust that grows stronger with time, and love that is rooted in sincerity rather than fear. May every step you take lead you closer to the people who value your genuine heart, and may you become that same source of peace in the lives of others. If this fictional inspirational story encouraged you, touched your heart, or reminded you of the quiet strength of honesty, please like this video, share it with someone who may need its message, and subscribe for more uplifting stories filled with hope, healing, and heartfelt inspiration. Until we meet again, may peace, wisdom, and love walk with you always.